Hey, this is Joe Markowitz back at you again. Kind of a follow up from our Liberty Dispatch, which I called The Hope of America. Hope you got a chance to see it. And I want to follow up on this one. I put that out. I put that out yesterday, and hope you get a chance to review it. I wanted to. I wanted to comment on this. I had an opportunity recently. My wife and I were in Colorado Springs, and we were there with some of our business leaders, and it was wonderful. Nice little town, small city. In that town was a little bookstore, and Mary Beth and I we stopped in, and there was some gems in there, some old books, and I found buried in that bookstore some precious little gems. I'm holding in my hand one called the Pictorial History of the American Revolution. Can you see that? It was actually published in 1846. And it is in great condition. This is extremely valuable, and I cannot wait to dive into this. This was actually published a little bit more than a generation after the fathers of the American Revolution, who lived through that time, suffered through that time, but they believed their lives stood for something, and that they many of them had died in a noble cause. But if they had not died in the Revolution and the War of 1812, at this time, about 70 years after the Declaration, this book was published by let me see, by a Robert Sears. So, and it's in great condition. There are maps in here. There's stories and pictures. But this was about 70 years. So the first generation now had died off. And now historians, 70 years later, after the signing of the Declaration of Independence, get a chance to look back on the impact of the American Revolution. And I'll tell you this, on my last Liberty Dispatch, and hopefully you got a chance to see it, I talk about the hope of America and why we should not ignore history, that you have a lot of voices out there, voices that are promoting division and strife, of shaming people to actually believe that the American Revolution and the founders were evil, that to try to convince our children that America is a racist country, that we should be hating each other. But if you understand history, you'll understand also there's great danger in that. And I've just started to get into this book. I'm not going to say I'm a historian, but I will say that I love history. And now that there's so much canceling, banning, banishment of political opponents right now, progressives they're in power. And if they can convince the population that America is bad and evil, and that everything that was written in this about a revolution is really false, and if they can convince our children, then America is doomed. And we have to remain vigilant. Ronald Reagan said that the principles of freedom and liberty aren't passed down through the bloodstream. Every generation is tasked with passing it down to the next generation. And now that we've gone through July 4th, 2021, I'd like to say that I'm beginning to see a revival in all things liberty and freedom, because there's been so much of an attack on the very fundamentals of what made America who we are. And I'd like to say that I'm starting to see a revival. I'm starting to see people diving in and learning, wanting to learn more about who we are, where we came from. Not just all the great conquests and success, but also the ugly parts and the things that are not pretty. so that we can learn, so we can rise up and make a better society, but not to throw out the principles of freedom and liberty, because if they die here, there's no place to run to. There's no place to go. Our founders knew that. Historians through the ages have known that. Now, I'm not going to read everything in this book, but I'll finish up by saying this. The topic of today's updated Liberty Dispatch is that history matters. History matters. I'm going to read to you just out of the preface of this wonderful book, this book that I cannot wait to get into, that was published in 1846, and the country was still very young at this point. Right out of the preface, Robert Sears, who put together this piece of work, he said this, quote, "The story of history cannot be appreciated too highly. It tells to the youth of our country a strong, full story of wisdom and replete with many a moral. It shows the influence and success of honor and virtue, that vice and dishonor go hand in hand. And it excites them to noble deeds of patriotism and calls upon them to do all and suffer all for their country." We can't ignore wisdom. You know, when things are seem like they're a little bit out of control right now, what do? We go back to the fundamentals. We go back to the truths. We go back to the wisdom of our founding fathers and what they intended to do and what they framed in our founding documents. The Declaration of Independence, our Constitution, our Bill of Rights. So important. So I wanted to follow up with this, that history matters. And by the way, while I have you here, well, check out, we just released Made in America, 2 brand new caps. This one is really cool, multicam, structured, mid-profile. You've got you can put all of your morale patches on here. It is awesome. We sell them with 2 PVC high-quality hook and loop patches. One is khaki black. The other is OD green and black, or you just wear it without if you want to. And then you've got our Live Free. This is really cool. Love this cap. And so anyway, that's Joe Markowitz with today's Liberty Dispatch. History matters. Until next time, keep it free. Don't give up. Stay the course. Stand strong.